do your due diligence and everything that you preach about knowing your audience, finding your audience, and, making people excited about the product before you release the product.
This episode is brought to you by the best-selling book, Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, How to Turn Your Independent Film into a Money-Making Business. Learn more at filmbizbook.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Heather Turman. How you doing, Heather?
I'm well, thank you, Alex. How are you?
I'm better. We are seeing the others. I think we're on the other side of this thing. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. I feel free. I don't have to wear my full hazmat suit anymore to go shopping, which is nice.
Yes. Same.
And off air, we were talking about how you found me and that you discovered my podcast at the beginning of the pandemic, and you've listened to, you said, all of them. And I said,
Yeah.
that's a lot of episodes. And you said,
It was a long pandemic. Yeah. I started going on walks, every morning with my, overly ridiculous mask, and, it would sort of start my day. So I dug it and became a fan. Thanks for doing this. What a great resource and inspirational, I think, tool for everybody. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I do what I can. I try to help as many people as I can, many filmmakers as we can. And we're going to talk about why we have to protect them sometimes from our business in our conversation. But before we do that, how did you get into the business?
Oh man, I moved to Los Angeles blindly at 18, right out of high school, not knowing. I'm one of those. I didn't know. I knew I wanted to be in entertainment, but I came from Michigan, and and at the time, I remember I got a book that was like, how to break into Hollywood, off of like Amazon was pretty new. Like this was 2005, and so it was still like digital media was just sort of starting. And this book did not prep me at all for any, there was no useful information.
Shocking.
No, exactly. It was awful. So I came here blindly, and I knew I wanted to write and make films, and just be involved. So I had, got started. I actually booked a commercial and met a fellow Michigander on it. And we produced a short film together in 2006 called Subdivision. And so that was sort of my first foray into producing my own content. But then I fell into stand-up comedy. And so I spent the last decade really, touring the country and that kind of thing. But in the middle of it, produced a web series and a couple other short films. And then in 2015, my writing partner and I had sold a feature script, but it didn't get made. So, it's that thing where it's like, well, this doesn't do anything for me. All it does is give me a check,
Which, by the way, big accomplishment. So let's not knock it.
Yeah, no, life goal achieved. Absolutely. And it's still my favorite script. It's just that sad thing, the script I was most proud of sold and it hasn't been made. So there was this feeling of, I did this really difficult thing, but my name is not on the screen, so people can't attribute my work, to me. And so I said to my writing partner, let's write a one location that we can shoot ourselves. And so we did that, and we wrote and produced Stuck, which we partnered with the director. She came on board as a producer as well, Julian Armenante. And and that's sort of where, since then, it's been more filmmaking drama with the distribution world and all that stuff. But yeah, I guess I've just been in the industry my whole adult life. And yeah.
That's awesome. So I can only imagine 18 coming from Michigan to LA. I'm sure they treated you fine. I'm sure.
No, nobody was predatory. Nobody was all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Nothing. Everything was, I'm sure, fine. They gave you work right away. Soon you were paying all your bills comfortably. I'm sure it was a smooth transition.
Oh yeah. Didn't slave away in restaurants at all.
Exactly. I came to LA probably 3 years after you did, but I had already been in the business for 10 years at that point. So I came just a bit more prepared. Not much more, but still enough that I was able to hit the ground running. But still, oh God, if I would have come at 18, they would have destroyed me. I would.
Yeah. I feel lucky to still be standing.
Now I want to ask you something. Do you believe in today's world that you need to if you want to be in the film business, I mean, LA is LA. It always will be LA, I think. For people outside, I mean, I came from Miami, so we're both from small markets, if you will, in the film industry markets. So I always felt that when I got here, a year here was like 5 years there for me. It was like almost like dog years in the amount of experience, exposure to good and bad, to the industry. Do you feel that is still the case today, or could you go to an Atlanta or a Vancouver or other Louisiana or other Austin, other areas, and still be able to build up that career?
I absolutely think you can do it anywhere now, especially because of, in addition to all the advancements technology's made in the last 10, 15 years, but the pandemic has, sort of exacerbated that aspect of it. Like and I guess that's kind of the wrong word because that's sort of making something worse, but it's made it so that, everything's through. All meetings are like this. You know what I mean?
Many are. Yeah. It's more This is much more acceptable. Like I've been recording podcasts like this for a long time, and people were like, "Oh God, it's on Zoom or it's on Skype. It's not. It's not." And now it's on the news. It's in documentaries. It's now very acceptable to do this. So yeah, and before you needed really to be in the room with an agent or with talent. Where now it's somewhat more acceptable.
But surely, yeah, and I feel like slowly but surely, you're seeing with the capabilities that independent filmmakers have in other markets and how much cheaper it is. California, of course, has employment laws and permit laws and all these things that make it so incredibly costly on the independent level. Those laws are there for big Hollywood, and it's great on that level. People need to get paid fairly when we're talking about millions and, millions of dollars. But when we're talking about an independent project, it becomes so much more difficult here that it's unreal, And so as time goes on, I become more and more interested in the concept of, going to a small town and making films there, because it's more possible, I feel like, these days than ever before without feeling like you're not at all connected,
Yeah, and also I think when you're outside of LA, people are much more excited about filmmaking. When
exactly. What do you want for free?
Exactly. When I shot my last film, I shot it at Park City during the Festival of Sundance. I was shocked at how many people, like all the businesses, were still excited. I'm like, oh, you're shooting a movie here? Yeah, what would you like? I was shocked because I was like, oh, they must be over it because of Sundance. But they're not. They were super excited and shooting outside of LA, because in LA they're like, okay, even the local deli's gonna go, I'm gonna need $1,000 for locations for 5 hours. Like they already know here's the contract. They already have the agreement set up. Like they're all sharp about it.
Absolutely. Anybody here who has any sort of property, a business, a home, they are very hip to the concept that is a filming location, and they will absolutely make sure to exploit anyone who comes to them looking for a place to shoot. So
I had a friend of mine who has a house down the street, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this new cable show wants to rent my house." I'm like, "Oh, how much are they paying you?" They're like, "Oh, it's $10,000 for 2 days." I'm like, so that's their line. That's their barometer. Yeah. So now when you show up, they're like, well, I got paid $10,000. I'm like, well, that's our budget for the film.
Exactly, for the film. Exactly. Which is, it's so interesting that you say that, because that was, when we went to do Stuck, it took place in a home. So we needed somebody to give us their suburban looking home for 10 days for nothing. I mean, how do you... So I know. I mean, I went door to door and I knocked and
really?
Met people face to face. Yep. And we found a house, and they $300 a day. Yeah.
Okay, so it was 300. There was something. There was some exchange.
There was something, and their child was an actor, so that helped. We were like, we'll throw her a part in the movie. That's
And scene. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. No, my first film I made was all in LA, but it was just my house, my actors' houses. Like it was all friends, or friends or acquaintances that we knew that would give us their house for the day or a couple days or something. But that's brave. You just went knocking on doors.
Yeah, we did. We definitely did. And we had another house that we really liked, and the woman was totally interested. And We brought the director to look at it and the DP and all that stuff. And then when we whip out the contract and we talk about money, she's like, oh, no, like absolutely not for $300 a day. I was thinking more like 10 grand a day. So,
well, of course,
because she knew the neighborhood, of course, it turned out we had chosen, it's like in Studio City, and it turned out to be one of the most sought after neighborhoods because of the look of it. It really looks like suburban America in the center of LA. And so they do all kinds of commercial shoots there. So all the people in the neighborhood were very aware. And the family that gave us their home for $300 had moved from Texas like a year before. So they hadn't been approached yet, so it's really just lucky,
They weren't hip to it yet. But you're outside of LA, you don't get those problems. Outside of LA, they'd be so excited to like see a camera and a crew, and it doesn't even have to have a star in it. That's just an excite. And we as filmmakers, we forget that there is an excitement for people. Like when we first saw a film set, my God, it was a huge thrill. But we're so like, it's another day at the office.
Exactly. But it's true. And out of state in a small town, not only are people excited, but they're just like, do you need extras? What do you need?
Food?
Like,
do you need food? We'll cook for you.
Yeah,
we'll cook for you. Oh yeah. Do you need a police department? I'll call my boy up and he'll come over. And it's pretty insane. Now tell me about your film Stuck. So you told me that you kind of put it all together in one location. How did it come to be, and how did you put it all together?
So, David McHale, he's my writing partner, and he also produced with me as well. I had approached him and said, let's write in one location. So we did have a few other locations, which of course were difficult ones, a doctor's office and a courthouse. I mean, a courthouse is hard, but we found a museum in Culver City that has a standing courtroom. And so $1,500, and then I have a friend in medical sales. So she hooked us up with the doctor's office. And so $4,500 for locations, you know what I mean? Which is that's incredible, In
LA? Yes.
Yes. It actually, because of that, I got hired to do location scouting for a film right after that because they couldn't believe what I was able to get. I'm like, I think it's because I'm willing to go knock on doors. You don't get it with the egos in this town. Most people aren't willing to do that. Mm-hmm. But I was. So, but yeah, we wrote this one location, and it's about a sort of a adult, like a woman child, irresponsible, pothead. She's a nurse, and she gets into trouble with the law. She's sentenced to house arrest, and she is couch surfing at the time. So her last legal address was her ex-boyfriend's house. So cut to her serving out house arrest for 30 days with him and his new fiance. And a friend of mine, Larry LeBeau, runs an organization called New Filmmakers, LA. It's a festival.
Of course, yeah, Larry.
Yeah.
I know Larry.
Okay. Yeah, I love Larry. He's the friend that I met on the commercial in 2006 that I produced a short film with. So,
amazing.
Larry is just the greatest. We tried to cheap out and not get permits. And when...
Oh, you got permits?
Huh?
You got permits?
No, we didn't.
I was going to say.
Then the cops came, and so we were told we had to, because that neighborhood, like I said, everybody in the neighborhood's like, you guys didn't flyer us,
yeah. Oh.
So Larry,
God,
and Larry, I know, and all the work that he does, with Film LA, he was able to call and literally have the governor expedite us a permit. It's supposed to be like a 72-hour wait. We got one immediately, which was, and that just goes to show that your friends in this business are the most important, part of this business.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry recommended, I asked him about a director. I said, I'm producing, my first feature that I wrote. Can you recommend some solid directors? And I said, preferably a woman, because I did want to, sort of pay that forward. And especially it was a female lead. I just wanted to go that route. And so he recommended Jillian Arminante, who had been in the business forever. And I had recognized her from her acting work. She was in Girl Interrupted and Bad Teacher, all kinds of stuff. And so we met with Jillian, and she was like, totally down, but we didn't have enough money to pay her. So she was like the amount she would, be willing to work for. So she said, let me partner as producer, trying to build up my company. And so the three of us worked together as producers. And, I was initially looking to make a micro budget $50,000 film. And when Jillian came on board, it's like, no, we're going to do this a little more grown up style. And so we ended up doing it for $150K. And, we scored in terms of cast, and that really, it stars Heather Matarazzo, who is now my wife. I met her on the movie and now we're married. But
Nice.
The one good thing that bleeding out of the eyes for an indie film brought me was that. My friends are like, hey, at least you got a wife out of it. I'm like, yeah, I got double screwed.
But
so Jillian, of course, was friends for 30 years with Joel McHale. So she had Joel up and said, will you play with us for a day? And luckily, that we had this role, the role of the judge is, one day sort of bookends the movie, beginning and end. And he was willing to do it. And once you have that name, even though it's a small part of it, we were able to go out to other people from there. So I made direct offers to Kate Flannery and, Kirsten Van Ness from Criminal Minds. And that kind of stuff. And then Heather. And Heather came on board and agreed. And then we made the movie.
So the key to getting actors on a low budget film is if you can tag one name.
If you can tag one name, yeah.
It's about one. That's one thing I've always realized is that nobody wants to be the first to the party. Nobody. That's in money. That's in cast. That's in everybody. Nobody wants to be the first to come in. But if you can get one other person to come in, that's even somewhat of a recognizable name or face or respect as an actor, because there could be worth nothing to the box office, but be very well respected by other actors.
Absolutely.
That can attract other actors without question. Yeah, and I did the exact same thing for my first film. I had one, called a friend, and everybody just showed up and played. And it was...
and played, and it's great. I watched both of your films, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I love them. They do look beautiful. And I was especially impressed by On the Corner of Ego and Desire, because, you listening to your podcast that, that you did shoot it off of a scriptman and in Sundance as it's happening. It's cool. The story behind the movie is especially cool.
It was absolutely insanity. It was 4 days, 36 hours, shot an entire feature. Actors I had never met before. It is a really insane story. I don't advise anyone doing it unless you have if you've got some years behind you and you could fall back on that experience, then yeah. But I like that one, but Meg, for me, is even more impressive because I shot the thing and now knowing what you went through and knowing that we made that movie in LA for about $5,000.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
It's insanity. But of course, paid. Everyone got paid, but it was all favors and no permits, no permission.
Of course. Of course.
Just no way. What's a permit run? Permits what is a permit?
It was it cost us $1,200 for the one, and that was not telling them we had other locations. That was lying and saying, "Yep, everything's at this house." So if we'd had to get one for Culver City and the doctor's office, it would have been a different story. Yeah.
Right. So that's why it's so cost prohibitive to shoot here, especially for an indie, and that's why you've got to be a guerrilla about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had other people on the show who've shot in LA. And but this other filmmaker I'm thinking of, they were brazen. Like they'd show up with grip trucks, and they would just get out in front of a location and just start shooting. And they're like, wait till the cops come. We got an hour. Let's see how long it takes before the cops come. And even when the cops show up, a producer sent to hold them back for 15 minutes while we finish the shots, and then they go. But they shot the entire city. It was pretty insane.
Yeah. Yeah. That really is how you have to do it. I was chatting with a female filmmaker the other day, and she said that sometimes you can sort of, that she's like, I'll play the female card with an officer, like, oh, we have to get permits because, like, like that they're
Like,
gonna
and then
think
she
like,
twirls
oh,
her hair.
Permits. She doesn't know what she's doing. Yeah.
Twirls her head. She's like, oh my God, do I need a permit?
I didn't know. Yeah.
I think I
So,
just broke out shoot. It's amazing. Like, sorry, that's my Valley girl, so I apologize.
no worries. I mean, that's the performance she would put behind. You know what I mean? Because you got to play what cards you have. And they're going to be like, oh, this is a woman's making this movie. Okay, it's not real. Move ahead. Like,
well, the other little trick is for everyone listening: always have a film student on set. So you always bring a film student as an intern on set. So if a cop does show up and you're doing something that's a little bit, not official, you're not hurting anybody, you're not stealing anything, it's just unofficial. You could always bring, it's a student film. And you bring the student, you show them the student ID and like, we're here to help the student. And, but if Nicolas Cage shows up, that's a problem. So you have to make sure.
You have money.
Exactly.
The city wants it. Yeah.
No, I remember we shot a film. I was part of a project years ago that was shooting on a DVX 100A camera. I think you might remember that camera.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was a fantastic camera. And IATSE showed up. This is in Florida. IATSE showed up because we had script trucks and everything. But then when they saw the camera, they said, we're good. And they just walked away. And we had big stars. We had an Oscar nominated, but he wasn't there that day, thank God. But when they saw that, they're like, these guys obviously don't know what they're doing.
They're like, oh, it's a camcorder.
We're fine. It's stuck to a dolly, but they don't know what they're doing. It's fine.
Totally.
But but that is another trick for everyone listening. Always have a film student on set, just for those occasions, because it gets you out of trouble. It gets you out of trouble. Yeah. And don't ever try shooting on Santa Monica Pier.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't recommend those touristy areas. That's definitely.
They see you coming.
You're asking for it.
Unless you're shooting with an iPhone. If you're shooting with an iPhone and it's all undercover, you might get away with it for a few minutes, but they'll be on top of you so quick. Oh.
Yeah, they'll swoop in. I remember for my web series in 2012, we needed an exterior. I'm sitting with the editor, and we needed. It's supposed to take place inside the Scientology Center, and so we're looking at the cut, and I'm like, we need an exterior. We do. So we grab his camera because he DP'd it too. We grab the camera, jump in the car, drive to the Celebrity Center. And he's standing on the corner filming it for within 10 seconds, like a swarm of Scientology security on bikes, just like, that's a pretty serious camera, And he's like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, you better get out of here. And they took my license plate. It was really crazy. But, when you're going to those types of places.
Did you get the shot?
We got the shot.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters. You got to get up, quick, done, out, get up, run.
I might be on some kind of list, but we got the shot.
It's perfectly fine. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfectly fine. Now, you mentioned that you might have had a couple issues with distribution. Can you elaborate a little bit about, because this movie was originally finished in?
It came out in 2019.
Okay, it came out in 2019. Originally came out in 2019.
Yeah.
So what happened? And everyone prepare yourselves, because this is, I'm sure, a horrific story.
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying that, no shade to my two producing partners, but they are definitely from a different generation than I'm from. And, I was really feeling like I trusted the concept of self-distribution. And I felt like, I was doing a lot of research at the time, and Sundance had a whole thing about, doing your own, just like they had a whole workshop, all this different stuff. And I really felt like, because of the cast, you look at like Felicia Day, she has a huge online presence. Alexis Giselle at the time. Joel, of course, and I came from the comedy scene. So I had tapped Alexis Giselle, who was a YouTube presence, who I had cast in my web series. It was her first job ever in 2012. So I had hit her up. And I had cast a guy that I had known at the time, Brian Jordan Alvarez, who after the film got Will and Grace and became the character who married Jack's character. So he got an Emmy nomination and he blew up. And I tapped Chris Redd from the comedy scene as well. And now he's on SNL. So it was like I got very lucky with the comedy scene and the people that I really saw talent in that blew up. And so knowing just the reach that all of those people had, and that's like not even Joel, and then not even Kate from The Office, and not even the Criminal Minds for Kirsten Vansness, and not even Heather Matarazzo. So I really felt like we could release this on our own, but the people that I partnered with they were a little, they're used to the old school way of like you find a distributor and that's the only way,
Sure.
Yeah. And so I'd even brought like a sales agent friend into the mix, but my co-producers, one of them didn't want to give away 20%, which I'm sure haunts them to this day. Mm-hmm. And so we, because it was a sales agent friend of mine who's legit, he sells movies for a living, and I really feel that would have been the safest way to go unless we experimented and tried to do it ourselves. But yeah, and so this company had approached us through Slated, which, if an indie distributor is seeking people out, I feel like that's kind of a red flag. I feel like unless you're
at a film festival and you just got done with the screening and they walk up to you like, "Hey, we're a distributor. We love the film. I
love your movie."
That's different. But if they soliciting you, which happens all the time, unless it's even if it's a big distributor. I mean, A24 is generally not emailing people.
Exactly. And because they're getting flooded all the time and they have their connects. And so you said it perfectly. Because yes, if you are at a festival and you show your film and somebody comes up to you after and is like, I would love to distribute this, here's my card. But if they haven't seen the film and they're just soliciting you, it's probably a red flag. But we met up with them, and the guy, the head of the company, they had a handful of cute films. Like I watched all the trailers and it was like, okay, it seems like this company really is looking to, they all sort of fit within this brand. And so it was like, okay, they seem like they know what they're doing. And the contract they offered us was amazing. It was.
Tell us the details.
It was, so we made the film for $150,000 and we crowdfunded a majority of that. I would say that about almost 100 was crowdfunded.
Okay.
And the other 50 was the three of us,
ponying up.
Yeah. Which we didn't expect to do. And then it was like, oh shit, we spent too much money. Here's for me, here's from you, And so they offered us $300,000 minimum guarantee, which was, we only needed to make like 60 grand. You know what I mean?
So they gave you an MG, a $300,000 MG in 2019, I'm assuming, around that time?
Yeah.
Because the game changes so often, it depends on when you got that deal, if it makes sense or not.
2018 that we got the deal, and
it
was released in 2019.
2018 is still ridiculous. That's not a thing that happens. But go ahead.
Yeah. And so, because at that time Netflix had stopped, there was a time that Netflix was giving out $500,000 for an indie film, but that went away,
Gone.
Yeah, and so that was in our contract, $300,000 minimum guarantee, and they paid marketing. So they paid marketing costs. That was in our contract, and obviously that's the big thing. Like, we'd done enough research to know that that's how they get you, is that they promise you all this stuff and then you get the bill and it's like, oh, they spend it all on marketing, so we get 12 cents, But
what was the top on their marketing? Was there a limit on their marketing or not?
There was not a limit. It said that
Done.
I know.
Done.
It said marketing. Yeah. But it said marketing was a team decision with the producer. So we were supposed to have a say in that as well. So, it's like, this deal it is
in theory, it sounds wonderful so far.
Yeah. But we have not seen a dime. And every other film that's with this company has, with the exception of maybe like one or two others, has pulled their film from them and, gone to court, got their money back. And this distributor is under investigation with the FBI for major fraud. A friend of mine came out of the woodwork. Oh, go ahead.
No. So they offered you a 300 MG. So when you delivered the film, I'm assuming a part of the contract, as soon as the film is delivered, some money is released?
It was after quarter one from exhibition. So exhibition began May of 2019, and so once quarter one, and he was like, oh, maybe it might be realistically it'll probably be like you'll get your first checks by the end of. It'll be during the second quarter that you'll see that money.
Was that $300,000 supposed to be broken up over multiple quarters, or was it going to just be one fat check?
So the contract was for by 40 months we would have that $300,000.
So it's a spread out MG. It was a spread out MG over 40 months. So you're talking about
So August 2022 is when it's up, but we haven't seen a dime, and it's clear we're never going to. So
wow, that's a pretty. I've heard of flat out people not paying MGs or distributors not paying MGs, but the way they structured that deal was you'll get a little bit of the whole 300,000 from now until 4 years along, which is generally not how MGs work. MGs work like you deliver the film, MGs, here's your check. Maybe break it up over the first year or something like that. I mean, Netflix does it over 2 years if you get it. And now they don't even pay you until after the agreement's over. So if they license it for 2 years, your first check starts at the end of. That's because it's Netflix, so they're just flexing their muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and you said your friend came out of the woodwork.
So yeah, and then a friend came out of the woodwork and said, "Oh, I didn't know that you had worked with." She's a friend of my wife, and she had hit her up and said, "I didn't know that Heather was working with this this guy." And she said, "Yeah, he's the distributor for the movie. Why?" And she said, "Well, 10 years ago, me and several actors came together to make an indie film, and we'd had about $150,000 that we'd all chipped in, like $3,000, $5,000. They'd all paid for it, and a week before, and he came on as a producer, and a week before they went into production, the money was gone and he ran away with it." And so then I started doing a ton of, that was the first red flag, like, cause that was right when the film was coming out. And so I'm calling my producing partners and I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag. And one of them thought, the distributor had fed one of them, he'd partnered with them on another project, and so he was basically sitting next to them feeding them all of this BS about how it's a disgruntled filmmaker that's suing them, and that's must be what I'm talking about. And I'm like, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a different thing, like 10 years ago. And I'm maybe he has turned over a new leaf and is trying to make things right, but I think we need to talk about this and see if we can get out of this. And I just, my team didn't agree with me essentially at the time. And then later it came out that person was, I guess I can't even really say that part yet, but yeah. Long story short, so now the distributor is supposedly still going to film festivals, I've heard, and still telling people that he wants to distribute their films under this company that's no longer in good standing. If you look it up, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, but he'll open up he just open up a new company if he wants to and start the whole thing again.
Exactly. And that I had read about that. I'd read about the bankruptcy, plan where they were filing bankruptcy and then going and buying all of their assets and basically, owning your film in perpetuity for nothing. And so when I read up on that, I was like, I think this is what he's doing. But he didn't end up filing bankruptcy. And it turns out that because he's the only one on the company and that kind of stuff, he still will end up being held liable. But at this point, it's like, we're going to wait till the 40-month mark when if we don't see that money, contractually, we'll get the movie back. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be over 4 years old. So it's, and we probably will still have to hire a lawyer and spend more money. So it's just something that, like, if I can impart any sort of wisdom on any filmmaker who's going through this, is just like, do your due diligence and everything that you preach about knowing your audience, finding your audience, and, making people excited about the product before you release the product. Like, you then can release your own product, and you can really have a bankroll if you do things right. If you crowdfund and you don't owe people money back, why wouldn't you release it and not give someone that power,
So right now the movie is basically in limbo. You have no idea.
It's in limbo.
It's out there right now.
It's out in the world, yeah.
It's out in the world, but you haven't gotten a check yet. And it's been how long now? since you were supposed to get a check?
2 years. We
Jesus.
are. I know. He worked with an aggregate company, so he then, of course, didn't even know how to get films up.
Who was
So
who
he
was the
worked with
aggregate? Who do you work with?
Tri-Coast.
Never heard of Tricoast. I've
Okay,
never
so
heard of
Tri-Coast.
Tricoast.
Really?
Never heard. They're an aggregator?
They are a distributor, but because he knew them, and I didn't think he had the ability to get the films on the platforms, so he signed with them as an aggregator as an aggregate for all of his whole slate.
So
And
then that's
they
another
basically-
middleman. So that's another middleman that's taking a chunk out of your money.
Exactly. Well, which, we owe nothing to them though. Like, their contract wouldn't underwrite ours. It's just that thing of,
Oh no, but it
that
will
thing
take.
of-
But they'll take money out of his cut,
Yes.
which would then
Yes.
take money out of your
Yes.
cut. Yeah,
yes,
no
which
question.
we're not going to see a cut anyway. You know what I mean? Like, he's a criminal. That's really all there is to it. He's, I know he had a court date for the FBI thing like a week or two ago, so he could be in jail for all I know right now. But go ahead.
So where is your film available right now?
It's on Amazon, and it was on all of them, but Tri-Coast recently dropped all of his films because of all the legal drama.
Okay.
So they ended up cutting ties with him, and so they got rid of all of his films. So I don't know if how capable he has been of getting it on anywhere else.
Right now it's only on Amazon.
As far as I know, yes, it was on Apple TV. It was on all these, but I think that it got pulled. And to be honest, I haven't checked. But it's definitely still on Amazon. Somebody just watched it the other day and hit me up.
So so obviously they're in breach of contract.
Yeah.
So they're in breach of contract. If they're off of all the platforms, why don't you just take control of the film again? And just
I tried to do this.
Okay.
So I tried to do this, and I again, when you're partnering with people that you don't have an existing relationship with, like I tried to go behind everyone's back and go to Tri-Coast and get the hard drives and do things that way. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to just be like, if you're a criminal, I'm playing with a criminal here. I'm gonna go steal my movie back, and I went there, and they'd already turned the drives over to him. So he has the hard drives, and he sent me a couple texts saying like, we still hold the copyright, but the contract, of course, assigns the copyright to him. So where we've left it right now is one of my producing partners spoke with him on the phone and basically let him convince him that like, oh, it's Tri-Coast's fault. I'm at odds with them. And I'm just like, dude, you cannot, he is a criminal. We're never going to see this money. And they're like, well, I don't want to pay for a lawyer, so let's just wait for the 40-month mark. So that's where we're at now. But it's been such a mess and such a nightmare. And I feel like I was not listened to this entire time by my producing team. Do you know what I mean? And so it becomes incredibly disheartening too. And I think that's the thing. If you're going to partner with other creatives on a project, make sure you're on the same page about distribution before you work together,
No, without question. I think distribution I've talked about distribution ad nauseum on this show, but I feel that it's just something that nobody wants to talk about. Everyone wants to talk about the creative part and the fun part, and hey, it's cool, and let's all talk about that, and we'll go to the premieres and walk red carpets, and ha ha ha, and our egos will be stroked, and it'll be great. But when it gets to this point, everyone just has different views, and I'm going to say 99% of filmmakers are completely ignorant of this process. Speaking to thousands of them and connecting with thousands of filmmakers on a daily, weekly basis. And what I hear all the time, most just don't know what to do. Even professionals are having issues in today's marketplace, let alone people who have no idea what's going on. Because there's a lot like your producing partners sound like they have the 1996 mentality of film distribution.
Yeah. And it's a changing, it's an evolving world, and it's changed so drastically. And I agree with what I've heard you say on this podcast before, in that if you want to know what's going to happen with film, watch what happened with music. And it's 100% true. And in some ways it's good because we are at that place where everyone can make a film. but you also now you are competing with everyone. And so what you make has to either, you have to know your audience inside and out, or you have to make something so good, be that rare, amazing, universal story that touches and reaches everybody. And not everybody is going to be able to write or create that film. And so, it's changed so much, and it's so important to be aware of the options and also to think like a business person. And I think that's the thing, because this is a creative field, so many people don't have, like, I feel like I'm split brained. Like, I was always good in math and science and good in English and the creative. So like this stuff adds up for me, but like a lot of the creatives, it doesn't. And so they get taken advantage of. I mean, even just the concept of agents, why agents exist, because the creatives don't, in general, like they're artists, they're not thinking about the business side of things necessarily.
Yeah, and I think there are places for, I don't want to say agents, but managers. Eventually one day I'll get an agent, maybe, who knows. But you need some, especially when you at a certain level, you do need someone negotiating for you. As long as
I'm not saying you don't. Yeah.
You definitely do.
I wasn't saying that.
Yes, but
reps are great. Yeah,
reps are fantastic, but it gets silly sometimes. And then there's always those reps that just sit around doing nothing. You go out and get all the work, and they take the 10% or 15%, or God forbid 20% if you've done a really bad job.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, there is that second set of eyes reviewing contracts and making the deals. Right. And a lot of times they make you more money, and so it's worth the money that you pay them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and they can connect you to deals. No shade to agents or managers at all.
No. I just meant the business aspect, that like creatives need that business brain, helping them along the way.
Yeah, without question. I wish I can tell you that this is a brand new story that I've never heard before, but you've listened to my show enough to know that this is not the case. I'm always fascinated by new techniques, new scams, new ways to screw filmmakers. I don't know. I guess I just I'm cut from a different cloth, because I just don't want to do that to people. Life is too short.
Yeah.
You're going to, I don't know. This is my feeling. In 100 years, no one's going to remember any of us anyway. Right?
Exactly.
So, why don't you try to do some good while you're here? Try to help some people, try to express yourself, be true to yourself. And that's basically what it is, because if you just, I don't know, it's now we're going down a whole other conversation, but it just upsets me that that filmmakers are treated this way. But you were saying something about music. That's what I was trying to get back to. With music, you're saying it's easy to make movies. It is super easy to make an album. Like it is, it's so much easier to make an album. There is so much more competition in music than there is in film. And watching what successful independent artists like Chance the Rapper and Drake and these kind of guys who came up completely without a label and did it all on themselves, that's inspiring. And we think we have a lot of competition. We're nothing compared to music. I mean, there's everybody and their mother thinks they can write a song or sing a song or put an album together and sell it. But that's where you need to focus on, like, what are they doing? What are the successful artists in that field doing that we can copy and model in our world? Because, oh God, and it's only getting tougher. So sorry guys, I know this is, I don't want to be a completely downer on this, but it's only getting tougher. Like you just said, Netflix isn't buying things like that anymore. And you know how many filmmakers I talk to every day, like, oh, I just want to get on Netflix. No, you don't. You're never going to get on.
Yeah.
Do you have Jason Statham on? Okay, yeah, you'll get. Do you have Bruce Willis? Maybe.
Yeah.
It's genre. It's genre based. Big star vehicle films is the only thing that they're buying outside of their originals.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I do feel certain, independent artists that are finding, it's almost like when you, especially when you look at someone like Jim Cummings, right? Mm-hmm. After winning Sundance, that didn't get him, Hollywood didn't come calling. Then he crowdfunded the feature. That didn't get Hollywood coming. Finally, after crowdfunding, this third, now, he's with CAA and taken seriously, and they're like, okay, this guy's legit. But like nowadays, it's like you have to do it. You should just take one film, and I just feel like now it's cultivating a voice and a brand through your work that's, it's like when you talk about what the musical artists do. For me, they are really good at doing them. Like they know themselves inside and out, and they are a personality, and their music fits within that personality. Like I feel like filmmakers have to do that same thing, where these films are representative of my voice. Those films are representative of their voice, and build that brand. And then you can sort of step outside a little bit and not just always, then you don't have to always, like when you're first getting started, make the vegan chef movie, you know what I mean? Like, and find your audience. But then like, if it's really funny and people start taking you serious, like start being like, that was a funny movie. I never, I caught it because I was dating a vegan. We're over. But that was a great comedy, then maybe they'll tune into your next comedy, and so eventually you can build out a brand and a voice.
I think you have a much better chance as a niche filmmaker doing niche stuff than you do if you're trying to do like a broad spectrum stuff, because everybody we talk about, look, there's probably arguably no better filmmaker who has a direct connection to their audience than Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith has cultivated over the last 20, 25 years, almost 30 years, an amazing relationship with his audience. He understands who he is. He understands the kind of films he makes, and he talks directly to the audience. The thing that a lot of people don't understand is that he had studio backing to get his voice and his brand out there. So did Spike Lee, so did Robert Rodriguez, so did Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. All of these guys had money behind them to launch this. They might not have it now. Like Kevin Smith doesn't do studio movies anymore, really. He does mostly independents. Right. But his brand has been established out there so much because of the studio system that they ride that wave. It's the same with actors. Actors have one or two big movies, and then they'll ride that for a career.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say names specifically, but there's actors who were in the 80s and 90s in big blockbuster films, but then their career kind of petered off, and then now they're working actors, but they're still off. They're still being paid off of that recognizability, off of the big studio pushes. And for an independent, I think the only way you can get noticed is in a niche market, and then hopefully grow from there. But be happy to stay in that lane at the beginning, and then maybe venture out. But if you can, I always tell people, and you've heard this, if you could just make a living doing what you love to do, if you could just do this, my God, you won. If you could pull. You won.
And
go ahead.
I was going to say, you won. Like, this is it. And I think that, like, that's the thing with, because of the stories like Robert Rodriguez and, Richard Linklater and everybody that you hear that had that beginning, you assume that that's going to happen for you. And so having an attachment to the outcome of your film is the worst thing that you can do. Agreed. Just make it because you love it and share it with the world. And if it makes people happy, then that will make you feel good. And that's it.
Enjoy the process, because the end goal is quick. If you're there for the awards, if you're there for the screening, for the applause, that's a very short amount of time in the entire process of what you're making. Every day in, day out, if you don't love what you're doing, that's why so many filmmakers are so sad. Like they win an Oscar, they're like, now what?
Yeah.
I don't have these problems, but many other people have had these problems where there's like, they win the Oscar, they win the award, they make a hit, and then they're like, oh God, this is all I've been focused on all my time. I don't know what to do now. I hope we have these problems. I'm like, oh God, I made $100 million. Now what do I do? Like, I hope I have these problems. But I think you've seen it in the films that I've made. I just enjoy the process, and I had no attachment to outcome, none.
Yeah, no, that's why I think I was so inspired by it. I had, stumbled on the podcast, stumbled on your book, and everything you were talking about in the book, I was like, well, which by the way, this was very funny because when we were looking for distributors, my wife had done a small film called Girl Flu, and they were with Glass House, I believe is what it was called. And I was looking through their Rolodex of films at the time, their slate. Is that who it was? And I saw
This Is Meg. Yeah, they did international distribution for me.
Yeah, so I saw the trailer for This Is Meg, and I watched it way before I heard your podcast, way before I'd read your book. And so then as I'm reading this book that is speaking to me, and I'm like, this is exactly what I was trying to say when we were building Stuck Out, is I was like, let's really target, like, it was just that thing that I had these instincts, but didn't execute and didn't wasn't taken seriously by my partners. And so when I was reading it and you said like, oh, my first film, This Is Meg, I'm like, that's so funny. And that made me then go watch it, because I was like, well, this feels a little bit kismet, because I had stumbled on an indie trailer. I mean, who does that, And then it turned out to be yours. And I loved it. And coming from the comedy community, Sean Polofsky, and I didn't know.
Jill.
Yeah, Jill. Yeah, I don't know her, but friends of mine know her. And so I really enjoyed it. And both of your films feel like the same director, though. You know what I mean? Like,
I guess,
we all have,
I guess,
we all have a style and a voice.
Yeah, there's an energy behind it. But then if you watch my earlier films, they have absolutely no, like, it's a completely different energy than those, or action and thrillers and things like that. But it's, look, if the Coen brothers can make Raising Arizona and Blood Simple, anything could happen then. And
we're humans and we evolve. At one point in your life, yeah.
Look at Spielberg. I mean, he hasn't made a really big popcorny movie in a while. He's a very serious filmmaker now. And they're great. And I love all his movies now too. I do miss him going back to that. But I think he's like, I've done that. I'm good. I don't need to make E.T. anymore. Yeah. I'm not that filmmaker. Yeah. I'm not that filmmaker anymore. Now I have to ask you, what is the big,
right? Sorry.
Yeah, I know, right?
What is growing films like that?
I know. What is the biggest lesson you've learned from making this film?
One is the thing that I would say two. I would say first and foremost is the thing I mentioned about not having an attachment to outcome, because I feel like emotionally it was such an incredible grief. And as a result of, and sort of coinciding with that, is compromising, man. Like, if you're going to go through the effort, and I think this is what I really learned, is that, I mean, I have started directing. I've dabbled in some shorts that cost no money. They were just experiments, but I definitely want to direct for sure now, because when you go through the effort of, building a world that you write on the page, and then go through the efforts and all the hours and labor that's involved in producing a film, especially when you're the type of producer that's knocking on doors and when we can't find patrol cars, I'm going on Craigslist and seeing who's selling, a black Crown Vic and saying, hey, sir, can I pay you to not sell that just yet? And you borrow it for my film. When I hit up an ambulance and say, can you guys come by for like an hour? You know what I mean? All kinds of different, stuff that I was willing to do. When you do that kind of groundwork and you don't have final creative say, it's like, it's a big heartbreak. And especially if, you're, just don't compromise that much. Just make sure that you really stick to your guns and the product you want to make, so that you are not bullied or, pushed out a little bit or just, yeah, I mean, compromising it with art is not cool. Don't do it unless it's like a small thing.
It's a tough look. Making a film is probably one of the toughest artistic endeavors ever created, because there's so many different. It has all the arts in it, all of it. It's all wrapped into one thing, and then also you can't do it alone. You need to compromise with other. Anytime you have other people.
Collaborate. I think the word is collaborate.
You do collaborate, but as any director at any level will tell you, I don't care if it's a $200 million budget or if it's a $50,000 budget, you got to compromise.
Yeah, but if you are but what I'm saying there is that knowing what to compromise on, do you know what I mean? And so that's what I mean. Really know the product you want to put out, so that when those times come, it's like, yeah, I can bend on that. That's not important. I think, there's that thing, Quentin Tarantino, something about music, like he was not willing, he needed the money to pay for the song because he knew that for sure was going to really make the scene. And so it's the thing of, and make the film. And so knowing those things and not bending on what is going to make the film and what that the film really is. But yes, of course you have to compromise because you are, like you said, it's a collaborative environment. It's so many different moving parts. And so of course that's going to happen. But yeah, I just mean like the meat. Like you can't compromise the meat. It becomes a different movie.
No question. There's a funny story I heard years ago about Michael Bay on his first film, which was Bad Boys. And there was a shot he wanted, and if any Bad Boys fans out there will know, there's a shot towards the end when there's a shootout in the airport. This guy explodes out of an airplane and crashes into something, and it was like a big event and thing. And Michael really wanted it, and at that time Michael was completely disrespected. He's a commercial director. They're like, whatever. They didn't really respect him, and he's like, I need the shot. I want the shot. And it's like, no. And then he's like, how much will it cost to do the shot? He's like, it's going to cost you $50,000 to do the shot, and we'll come in an hour or two early and set it up tomorrow if you want to do it. And he goes, I'll pay for it. The next day before the take, he took the check and placed it in front of Daly's, in front of the lens, and recorded it so everybody knew that he was paying for the shot, but he got a shot. And you got to, regardless if you like Michael Bay movies or not, you got to respect that. You got to respect that.
100%. Yeah. I ended up having to sell my car to pay off the crew. And I remember
Wow.
at the time, it was
God
so
bless you.
awful. I know. And so that's why the distribution thing's even worse. But it's like, so I had done that. And the crew, though, knowing that I was doing that, had said the kindest things to me. And just, I know that I'll always be able to work with them again, because of that. And so, you definitely have to make those sacrifices when needed.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully you don't have to sell your car. Hopefully you don't have to sell your car. Now, what advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Just make. Start small, tell small stories. Learn how to direct actors in a one room story, and get bigger from there. And just learn. That's it. Get started and learn, and start small so you don't overdo it. Like I said, I wanted to do a $50,000 movie. I'm happy with the movie. It's a rockin' little indie, but it was much bigger than I intended it to be or get, and it put me financially in a hole for about 2 years. And so, don't go too big too soon.
Exactly, I agree with you. Now, 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh man, I'm gonna get laughed at about this, but the Brady Bunch movie is one of my favorite movies.
First time after 600 or some episodes of all my podcasts, Brady Bunch never won.
Everyone should. Have you ever seen it?
Of course I have. I've loved that. Of course. So, it's great. It's fun.
It's great, and just it's brilliant directing because it's the Brady actors are in a whole different world than the rest of the cast. It's brilliant, and it's so funny. So I love the Brady Bunch movie is one of my favorite films. And recently, and growing up, oh man, everything Charlie Kaufman ever did.
Adaptation.
I mean,
yeah, Malkovich.
Adaptation. Yeah, Eternal Sunshine. And lastly, I'd have to say, and then just recently, I think I love Booksmart. It was one of my favorite films in the last decade. Yeah,
very, very fun. And then where can people watch Stuck? Even though you won't be getting paid off of it yet, but where can people watch it?
Watch it because I want people to see. You know what? My wife gave a killer performance, and I've seen people say that where they're like, wow, Heather Matarazzo, this is her first adult lead since Welcome to the Dollhouse. Like and she killed it, and she did such a great job. So I want people to see it for her. So it's on Amazon, and I believe do a Google search because I haven't done one in a minute, and I'm sure you can find it on other platforms. But it's out there. Yeah,
it's on Amazon, and hopefully one day we'll get some money for it.
One day I'm gonna write a book about the experience. I'll make my money back there.
That's the filmtrepreneur method. Fantastic. Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for being so raw and honest and transparent about your experience and your journey. Hopefully this will help some filmmakers out there listening. So thank you again so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.